All right, so get this.
Okay.
We're diving deep into Victorian England today.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah, to investigate Mary Ann Cotton.
Hmm.
To try to figure out,
Yeah.
She really was Britain's first female serial killer?
Oh, wow.
Or just a woman surrounded by tons of tragedy?
Okay.
We've got a really fascinating mix of sources for this one.
Like what?
Well, we've got like a YouTube video on like haunted histories.
Okay.
And a Wikipedia article that just kind of lays out the basic facts.
Sure.
And a couple of articles that are more focused on historical tourism and true crime.
Interesting.
Yeah. And then another one that analyzes Mary Ann Cotton as a subject for criminologists.
Oh, wow. So like a variety of different perspectives.
Exactly. So we're really going to try to get to the bottom of this.
Yeah.
And see what we can figure out.
Okay.
I mean, the really interesting thing here is that Mary Ann Cotton's story isn't just about, like, the murders themselves.
It also kind of brings up all these questions about how society viewed women in the 19th century.
Yeah.
Like the sources we've got, they suggest that like the legal and social norms of that time might have actually made it easier for her alleged crimes to go unnoticed.
Like, for example,
Yeah.
the YouTube video points out that under English common law, a woman was basically considered her husband's property.
Oh, wow.
They had very few rights. And their actions were rarely examined independently.
Oh, so they basically had no agency.
Yeah, pretty much.
It
Yeah.
is crazy to think about.
It is. And understanding that context is crucial.
Yeah.
If we really want to grasp how a woman like Mary Ann Cotton could have potentially like operated under the radar for years.
I mean, to really understand her, we have to go back to the beginning.
Okay, so let's go back.
So Mary Ann Robson.
Robson.
Yeah, that was her maiden name.
Yeah.
She was born in 1832 in County Durham, England.
Gotcha.
And our sources, they paint this picture of a really difficult childhood for her.
Marked by like poverty and a very strict father.
Yeah.
And there's this particularly striking detail
What's that?
about the death of her father in a mining accident.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the YouTube video really goes into detail about how his body was actually brought home in a coal sack.
No way.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
Literally marked property of the South Hetton Coal Company.
Oh, that is so sad.
I know.
And just like dehumanizing.
Yeah.
I
mean, can you imagine the impact that must have had on young Mary Ann?
It's a haunting image for sure.
Right.
And it's one that likely had a profound impact on her views of life, death.
Right.
And maybe even the value that society placed on human life.
Exactly.
You have to wonder if that early trauma combined with her later experiences played a role in her potential motivations.
And that's where things start to get really interesting.
Okay.
With Mary Ann's first marriage to a man named William Mowbray.
William Mowbray.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this seems to be where that disturbing pattern starts to emerge.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they moved to Plymouth,
Oh.
and 4 of their 5 children died.
Gosh.
Now, we know child mortality was sadly common back then.
Right, right.
But the circumstances surrounding these deaths were definitely suspicious.
The Wikipedia article actually points out that while some sources mention 4 children dying in Plymouth, others list 5. But regardless of the exact number, what's really suspicious is that the deaths of her children with William and then William himself point toward potential foul play. It's also interesting to note that she received insurance payouts after each death.
Oh, whoa.
Which introduces a possible financial motive.
You're right.
Right.
And that's something that comes up again and again throughout the sources.
Yeah.
And we know that arsenic poisoning was a tragically common method for killers during the Victorian era.
Why was that?
Well, for one thing, arsenic was readily available and it was cheap.
Okay.
And then the symptoms mimicked common illnesses.
Oh, so it was hard to detect.
Exactly. And perhaps most importantly, arsenic poisoning was easy to pass off as a natural death.
I see.
Especially considering the limitations of forensics at the time.
Right.
I mean, it's just chilling to think about.
It is.
But when you consider the bigger picture,
a
very disturbing pattern really starts to appear.
It's like watching a slow-motion train wreck.
Yeah.
Then what happens?
Well, Mary Ann goes on to marry George Ward.
Uh-huh.
And then James Robinson.
Okay.
And both men died under suspicious circumstances.
Oh, gosh.
Each time leaving Mary Ann with insurance money.
It's hard to write that off as just bad luck.
Yeah, it really starts to look like a calculated plan.
I agree.
It's a pattern that's hard to ignore.
Yeah. But it's also crucial to consider the intense societal pressures that a woman like Mary Ann faced in Victorian England.
Right.
I mean, there were so few opportunities for financial independence.
Yeah.
So is it possible that she was driven to these extreme measures out of desperation?
The sources do mention that Marianne seemed to crave a better life, one with financial security and social standing.
Right.
So do you think she saw these men,
Yeah.
especially the ones who were already ill,
Uh-huh.
as her ticket to a better life?
That's certainly a question worth exploring.
Yeah.
Let's take a closer look at her potential modus operandi.
Okay.
It's a bit unsettling.
Okay, so here's the pattern as we see it.
Okay.
Marianne befriends a man, marries him,
Uh-huh.
takes out an insurance policy on him,
Okay.
and then boom, he dies from some kind of stomach ailment.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, it's like a tragically predictable horror movie,
Yeah.
don't you think?
The sources seem to suggest that as time went on, the deaths happened more frequently, and she became bolder in her approach.
Really?
Yeah, it's as if she was gaining confidence or even becoming addicted to the sense of control and power she was wielding.
That's terrifying.
It is.
And it's not just husbands who become victims in this horrifying scheme.
Right.
Yeah.
It expands to include her mother
Yeah.
and even her own children.
Yeah. What makes a woman decide which of her own children to keep and which to,
That's an incredibly disturbing question.
Yeah, it sends chills down my spine.
Yeah, it leads us to consider her psychological state.
Right?
Was it purely about the money?
Right?
Or was there something much darker driving her actions?
And that's where the article on historical tourism mentions something that really makes you think.
What's that?
It points out that of her 13 children, 2 actually survived.
Oh, wow.
What made those 2 different?
That's a chilling thought.
I know, right?
Unfortunately, the sources don't offer any definite answers,
Right.
leaving us to ponder those unsettling possibilities.
And then there's Frederick Cotton,
Okay.
who became her 4th husband.
Fourth husband, wow.
But get this, they married while she was still legally married to James Robinson.
What?
It's like something out of a soap opera,
I know.
only with much higher stakes.
It really speaks to a level of manipulation and deception that is terrifying.
And of course, Frederick Cotton, his sister, and one of his children,
Uh-huh.
they all die under Marianne's care.
Oh my gosh.
The body count is just staggering.
Yeah. And it was the death of Frederick's son, Charles, that really started to unravel everything for Marianne.
So this is where things take a dramatic turn.
Yeah.
So Marianne attempts to send young Charles to a workhouse,
Okay.
but the parish official, Thomas Riley,
Mm-hmm.
starts to get suspicious.
What tipped him off?
Well, he noticed the string of deaths surrounding her
Right.
and decides it's time for a closer look.
It's like he was finally putting the pieces together.
Exactly.
The sources point out that it was a chilling comment Marianne made about Charles.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that really piqued Riley's suspicions.
Like what?
She reportedly said, "I won't be troubled long. He'll go like all the rest of the Cottons."
Oh, my God.
Talk about a red flag.
Yikes. That's a pretty damning statement.
It is.
And sure enough, Charles dies just days later. Riley immediately contacts the police,
Okay.
and the investigation begins. This time, though, they weren't going to let anything slip past them.
Thankfully.
They exhume Charles's body,
Yeah.
and finally, there is evidence of arsenic.
Wow.
Finally, they have what they need to arrest Marianne Cotton.
It's interesting, though,
Yeah.
that even though they suspected her involvement in all the other deaths,
Right.
they could only charge her with Charles' murder.
Why is that?
Well, Victorian-era forensics simply couldn't definitively prove her guilt in the other cases.
So she might have gotten away with multiple murders.
It's a frustrating reality of the time, isn't it?
Imagine what today's DNA technology and advanced forensic science would have revealed.
That's mind-boggling.
So here we have Marianne in custody,
Uh-huh.
awaiting trial for the murder of her stepson,
Right.
and the evidence against her is mounting.
Yeah.
The public is captivated by the case.
Of course.
What happens next?
Well, for that, you'll have to wait until our next segment.
Oh, come on.
Stay tuned because the trial of Marianne Cotton is about to begin.
I can't wait.
And it's a real nail-biter.
Oh, I bet. So the trial of Marianne Cotton,
Yeah.
it was a huge media sensation back in 1873.
Whoa, I bet.
I can only imagine what it'd be like today.
Oh my gosh, I know, right?
With social media,
It'd be crazy.
some of the newspaper articles from that time,
Yeah.
which are mentioned in our sources,
Okay.
they painted her as like this heartless, calculating monster.
Right.
But it's important to remember that public opinion isn't always accurate or fair.
That's absolutely right.
Right.
We have to be careful about taking those sensationalized accounts at face value,
Yeah, man.
especially with sources like that YouTube video that
Yeah.
rely on a book by a criminologist.
Right.
We're getting an interpretation of events.
Right.
not necessarily the unvarnished truth.
Exactly.
So let's dive into the trial itself and look at the facts.
Okay, so the trial took place at the Durham Assizes in March of 1873.
Okay.
What did the prosecution focus on?
Well, they had to have something strong to convince the jury to convict, right? The Wikipedia article lays out the prosecution's case pretty clearly.
Okay.
They went all in on the arsenic evidence that was found in Charles's body.
Okay.
They argued that Mary Ann had a clear motive, financial gain from the insurance policies.
Of course.
They also pointed out that her actions showed premeditation and a disturbing pattern of behavior.
Right.
Basically, they were saying that this was no accident and that she knew exactly what she was doing.
But the defense wasn't just going to sit back and let that happen.
No, absolutely not.
They must have tried to poke holes in the prosecution's theory.
The article that discusses Mary Ann Cotton from a criminologist's perspective explains that the defense actually had some clever arguments.
Like what?
One of their main points was that the arsenic found in Charles's body might have come from other sources, like the wallpaper in their home.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Back then, green wallpaper often contained arsenic-based dyes. So they were trying to introduce reasonable doubt by suggesting alternative explanations for how the arsenic got there.
So they were basically saying it could have been accidental poisoning.
Yeah, exactly.
Did that strategy work?
Well, not quite.
Okay.
The prosecution had a counter-argument ready. They presented evidence that the arsenic levels in Charles's body were far too high to have been caused by accidentally ingesting some flakes of wallpaper.
Right.
They also brought up the fact that Mary Ann had purchased arsenic from a chemist, claiming she needed it to get rid of lice and bed bugs.
Yeah, that's suspicious.
That obviously raised some serious red flags.
Yeah, for sure.
And the sources also suggest that Mary Ann's behavior during the whole investigation didn't really help her case much either.
Like, what do you mean?
Well, it sounds like she was more concerned with getting her hands on that insurance money than she was about grieving for Charles.
Oh, yeah. That doesn't look good.
Right. That apparent lack of remorse likely played a role in how the jury saw her.
The historical tourism article I read
even
mentioned that some witnesses testified about her cold demeanor.
Oh, wow.
And how she had this habit of predicting the deaths of people around her.
Really?
Almost as if she was getting some kind of twisted satisfaction from having that kind of control over their lives.
That's a chilling thought.
It is.
Did Mary Ann testify in her own defense during the trial?
She did.
Okay.
According to the sources, she completely denied all charges, claiming that she was just a victim of circumstance and malicious gossip.
Right.
But her testimony seems to have fallen flat.
Yeah.
The jury deliberated for only 90 minutes.
Wow.
Before coming back with a guilty verdict.
90 minutes, that's incredibly fast.
I know, right?
It sounds like they had no doubt in their minds that she was guilty.
What was her reaction when they read the verdict?
Well, the sources describe her as being hysterical at first.
Oh, wow.
But she quickly regained her composure.
Really?
And insisted she was innocent.
Wow.
All the way through the sentencing phase.
She was really sticking to her story.
Yeah, she even tried to appeal to the Home Secretary for clemency, but ultimately her efforts were unsuccessful.
It's strange. It's almost as if she couldn't grasp the seriousness of the situation.
Yeah.
Or maybe she was so used to getting away with her alleged crimes that she actually believed she could escape justice one more time.
That's a fascinating psychological question.
Yeah.
But the reality was the evidence against her was overwhelming this time.
Right.
And public opinion was firmly against her.
Yeah.
There was no escaping the consequences.
So Mary Ann Cotton was sentenced to death by hanging.
Wow.
So what happened next?
Yeah.
Did she finally confess to all of her other suspected crimes before she was executed?
You'd think she would.
Yeah.
But according to our research, there's no record of a confession.
Wow.
The sources indicate that she maintained her innocence right up until her execution.
That's unbelievable.
Which took place on March 24th, 1873, at Durham County Jail.
It's almost unbelievable to think that someone could commit such horrific acts and never admit to them or express any regret.
I know. It's hard to wrap your head around.
Did the execution go as planned?
That's where things get even more disturbing.
Oh.
According to historical accounts, the executioner, William Calcraft, seems to have deliberately botched the hanging.
What?
Instead of a quick and relatively painless death by a broken neck,
Oh, gosh.
Mary Ann was left to slowly strangle.
Oh, my God.
It would have been an agonizing and prolonged ordeal.
Oh, wow. I can see why some people might say she got what she deserved after the suffering she inflicted on others.
Right.
But honestly, it also raises some serious questions about the ethics of capital punishment.
It's a complex issue.
It is.
And it's one that's still debated today.
But what's really fascinating is that even after her death, Mary Ann Cotton's story continued to grip the public imagination.
It did.
Remember that nursery rhyme we mentioned?
Oh, yeah.
The one that goes, Mary Ann Cotton, she's dead and she's rotten.
It's a bit morbid.
It is.
For sure.
But it shows just how deeply her crimes impacted society.
Yeah.
Especially in Northeast England, where most of her alleged murders took place.
And that's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
You see, the criminology article points out that while Mary Ann Cotton was a household name during her lifetime, for decades after her death, her story kind of faded from the national spotlight.
So what sparked this renewed interest in her case?
Yeah.
Why is her story relevant to us today, over 150 years later?
Well, there are a few reasons for that.
Yeah.
Firstly, there's been a huge surge in interest in true crime.
Oh, yeah.
Especially in historical cases like this one.
Right.
Secondly, the advancements in forensic science have allowed us to re-examine cases like hers with fresh eyes.
Yeah.
And new insights.
Good.
And finally, there's a growing awareness of the complexities of female criminality. We're starting to challenge those traditional narratives about women who commit violent crimes.
And that's a good thing.
Which is a good thing.
Right.
That makes sense.
And this is playing out in popular culture as well.
Yeah.
Like with that ITV miniseries Dark Angel, which tells a fictionalized version of Mary Ann Cotton's story.
Right.
It's clear that this case still has the power to generate debate and intrigue.
Absolutely.
But beyond the sensationalism of the murders, there are deeper issues at play here.
Right.
Mary Ann Cotton's story forces us to confront uncomfortable truths.
Like what?
About societal pressures, the limited options for women in that era,
and
the vulnerability of those who are often overlooked in Victorian society.
So the big question is, was Mary Ann Cotton a villain, a victim?
Or maybe a disturbing combination of both.
Our sources provide a lot of compelling evidence and intriguing insights, but in the end, it's up to each of us to form our own conclusions.
What do you think?
That's the great thing about a deep dive like this, wouldn't you say?
I agree.
We've uncovered all this information.
Right.
But it's the questions that stick with you.
Yeah.
The nuances that we wrestle with that truly enhance our understanding of this fascinating, and let's be honest, a disturbing case.
Right.
But there's one more aspect to Mary Ann Cotton's story that I think is worth exploring.
What's that?
Her legacy.
Okay.
It's more than just the nursery rhyme and the morbid curiosity.
Right.
Her case, as brutal as it was, actually had ripple effects on society.
Really?
Particularly in the field of forensic science.
How did it influence forensic science and public policy?
Right.
And what lessons can we learn from this chilling tale?
Those are some great questions.
They are.
And I think we'll need to save them for our final segment.
Oh, come on.
Stay tuned. Because we're going to uncover the lasting impact of Mary Ann Cotton on history, society, and even our understanding of human nature.
I can't wait. Okay, so we've talked about Mary Ann Cotton's life.
Yeah.
Her alleged crimes and that really dramatic trial.
It was.
But now let's talk about her legacy.
Okay.
Because it goes way beyond a creepy nursery rhyme and just our modern fascination with true crime.
Right.
You know, this case, as horrible as it was, actually had a real impact on society, especially when it comes to the development of forensic science.
That's a great point.
We're talking about a time when forensic science was in its very early stages.
Yeah.
It's hard to imagine how a case like this from so long ago could have much of an influence.
Yeah.
But it really did.
So how did it?
Well, the sources point out that the investigation into Mary Ann Cotton's alleged crimes really brought the dangers of arsenic poisoning to the public's attention.
Right.
You know, arsenic was a readily available and popular poison back then.
Yeah.
But it was incredibly difficult to detect.
Right.
And the symptoms were easily mistaken for common illnesses.
So basically, her case exposed the flaws in the methods they had for detecting and proving poisoning.
Exactly.
Interesting.
So if you can't prove poisoning,
Yeah.
you can't convict someone of the crime.
Right.
Did this lead to any changes in how they investigated poisoning cases going forward?
Absolutely. Well, they realized they desperately needed more advanced forensic techniques. And over time, this led to the development of much more sensitive tests for not just arsenic, but for other poisons as well.
Wow.
Yeah. It also sparked a deeper understanding of how poisoning affects the human body.
So Mary Ann Cotton, in a strange way, helped pave the way for all the advancements we have in forensic toxicology today.
It's a strange kind of legacy.
It is.
But it is a legacy.
Her alleged crimes were horrific,
right?
But without intending to.
Yeah.
She contributed to a field that now plays a vital role in bringing criminals to justice.
Absolutely.
But her legacy goes even further than forensic science. It also raises questions about public policy, especially when it comes to the way life insurance was handled back then.
Right, because those insurance payouts were a key element in her story.
Exactly.
Did her case lead to any changes in how those policies were regulated?
Well, there wasn't an immediate overhaul.
Okay.
But it definitely sparked serious conversations about how life insurance could be abused. The sources I read all mentioned that Mary Ann's ability to repeatedly take out insurance policies on her victims,
right,
and then directly benefit from their deaths, raised huge red flags.
Of course.
People started questioning how easy it was to get these policies, and whether there was enough oversight in the industry.
It's almost like she found a way to exploit the system.
Right.
And the result was the loss of innocent lives.
Exactly.
And while there were already concerns about something called baby farming.
Baby farming, what's that?
Which was this horrible practice where people would take in babies for a fee, but often ended up neglecting or even killing them for profit.
Oh, it's terrible.
Mary Ann Cotton's case added another layer of urgency to the need for stricter regulations.
So, did all of this lead to any actual changes in the laws or in the way insurance companies operated?
Over time, yes, it did.
Like how?
Well, it became part of a larger movement to reform life insurance practices.
Okay.
And by the end of the 19th century, they'd introduced new laws specifically designed to prevent the kind of exploitation Mary Ann Cotton was suspected of.
So those changes were a direct result of the public awareness her case generated?
It's hard to say for sure, but her case, along with other high-profile murders that involved insurance fraud, definitely contributed to the momentum for reform.
Like what kind of reforms?
Well, these changes included things like stricter requirements for taking out policies, closer scrutiny of who the beneficiaries were, and limits on the amount of insurance you could take out on a child.
It's kind of amazing when you think about it. Yeah. That so much positive change could come from such a dark chapter in history.
It is.
You know? It shows how important it is to learn from past mistakes.
Right.
Even when those lessons come at such a high price.
It's true.
This has been a truly fascinating deep dive.
Yes.
We've explored the life and possible crimes of this woman who may have been a serial killer.
Right.
Delved into the complexities of Victorian society. And uncovered the long-lasting impact her case had on everything from forensic science to public policy.
Yeah, it really highlights how a single event even one as horrible as this, can have ripple effects that continue to be felt for generations.
I agree.
It makes you think about how history isn't just about dates and facts.
Right.
It's about human stories.
Yeah.
And some of those stories can have a profound impact on the world we live in today.
And it leaves us with some important questions to ponder.
Like what?
For example, would Mary Ann Cotton have been as successful? If that's even the right word. If she had lived in a different time. A time with more opportunities for women and stronger legal protections.
That's such a thought-provoking question.
Isn't it?
It really emphasizes how important it is to consider the social and cultural context surrounding any crime.
Exactly.
It makes you wonder about all the other Mary Ann Cottons.
Oh, gosh.
Who might have existed throughout history.
Right.
But their stories have been lost.
Right, yeah.
Because of the limitations of forensic science.
Yeah.
Or simply because society allowed them to stay hidden in the shadows.
That's a chilling thought.
It is.
But that's what makes these deep dives so captivating.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you say?
I would.
They challenge us to think critically. To question our assumptions.
Right.
And to confront the dark side of human nature.
Absolutely.
And while we may never be able to fully understand the mysteries surrounding Mary Ann Cotton's life and her motivations, the journey of exploring her story has been incredibly illuminating.
It has.
It's a powerful reminder that history, is more than just a collection of facts and figures.
It's a tapestry woven from human stories, some inspiring, some tragic, and some like Mary Ann Cotton's, that continue to fascinate and haunt us long after the final chapter has been written.
So we leave you, our listeners, with this final thought-provoking question.
Okay.
If Mary Ann Cotton had been born into a different world, would her life have taken a different path? Or were the seeds of darkness already planted within her, just waiting for the right circumstances to take root and grow?